Hello, this is Mitch Tarr speaking, President and CEO of ZinMarketing.com. And today we're going to cover a topic which is based on a question that I get quite often. And I haven't really seen anywhere where there's a good framework to go through and figure out how to select the right software to run your email marketing campaigns on. So what I'll do today is I'm going to give you a framework that you can use and some ideas on how to select the right email marketing service provider. Most often the type of advice I see is somebody says, use this software, and it's because they like it or prefer it, or it's the only one they've been exposed to. And mostly there's just a lack of information about what's available for you and what you need to do your email marketing properly. And we've had over the years, we've been involved in 2,400 different email campaigns. We've probably used about a dozen different platforms, a dozen different email service providers. And we've learned a few things, and we've learned how to compare and contrast the different ones. And before you ask, we don't have one software package which we prefer above all others. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. They all have different things that make them more suitable for one environment versus another. So really what we tend to do is, after we've explored a customer's environment and what the requirements are, we tend to select one and say, this is the right one for you and here's why. So what we'll do is today is just go through that thinking process, how we approach it and how you can approach it as well, so you can figure out what are the right tools to use to make your email marketing as effective as it can possibly be. So let's talk about what your choices are. You can certainly send emails out in small quantities from MS Outlook. There's a merge feature you can use, or you can put them into small batches and send them out with a list. And you see people copy their list into the BCC file and send it that way. Or you can do the bulk emails in batches in Gmail and Hotmail. But usually you're restricted to like 50 or 100 messages or 50 to 100 emails at a time. So, if you start getting any number of emails on your list, that can be time consuming. You can send it from your current mail server and your current platform, and we'll talk about that. You can get a dedicated email server and buy some software to run on it so that you've got control over your environment, and a lot of IT folks like to do that, or a lot of technical folks like to do that. Or you can send from an email service provider. We'll call it an ESP for short today. And one of these stands out as pretty much a clear winner, head and shoulders above the others. We'll talk about why that is as we get through them. So sending from MS Outlook or Hotmail or Gmail, people have sort of grown into this just because if you have a small list, by small list I mean under 500 or 1,000 names, that tends to be one way that people go about trying to do this. And in the town that I live in, there's a local vendor that was doing this. She had a sign-up sheet at her shop, and people would add their names to the list, and I did that too. And then on Wednesday night, she would sit there and batch her emails into groups of 50 and just send out the messages 50 at a time. And it would take her like hours to do it. And if anything went wrong, it would take more hours. And, finally I just said, there's a better way to do this, and it doesn't cost you very much money, or it might not cost you any money unless you really enjoy spending the time. And she was just so grateful to not have to do it this way. So sending it like this can be really, really time consuming. And if you do it this way, you also have to manage your unsubscribes and bounces and additions to the list manually. I mean, you have to say to people, when an email address bounces, you have to delete it from your list manually. You have to find it and delete it. If somebody sends a reply back and says, don't send me another message, you've got to go in there and basically find the email address and get it off your list. And there's a lot of manual work that has to be done to make this go properly. So in simple terms, don't do it this way. And if you are starting to do it this way, if you're thinking about doing it this way, just don't. It's not worth your time and or effort. And so if your list is going to be of any size, and anything over 1,000 names is going to become effort to manage it this way. By the same token, if you try and send it through your own email service or your own email server, you have all the same manual issues of list management. You've got to keep the list, and you've got to manually look after the unsubscribes and bounces and updates. And if something does go wrong, if somebody complains and says, hey, I'm getting this message, it's a spam message, and they complain to your ISP, your own emails can be in jeopardy or at risk of being stopped or blocked. So this is just a little bit extra risk. It's lots of extra time, and it's extra risk to doing it this way. So our advice just straight up is try to avoid try to avoid doing this. And I had a client that was using Comcast.net was where their email services were hosted, or where their email services were managed, and they had some trouble because they sent out an email to everybody that they had met in the past, and somebody, actually more than one person, complained, and all of a sudden Comcast was blocking and shutting down their regular day-to-day email. So it's very disruptive to their business, and that's a risk you just don't want to take. So the next step to that is, well, if you've got smart tech guys or an IT department, you can set up a dedicated email server and buy some software to manage it. And a lot of people do that quite successfully and quite effectively. The only challenge with it is that you have to manage the delivery issues at the back end. You have to know what goes on when a blast goes out, and you have to know the communication that happens between companies that receive emails like Yahoo and Gmail and Hotmail and those types of email clients. When they communicate back to you certain feedback like spam complaints or bounces, etc., you still have to deal with those issues at your end. And on top of that, you now have to protect the reputation of your sending server. So there's lots of extra work to go about doing this. It's not a terribly bad thing to do. I kind of suggest you if you're really small, you don't do this because it's just too much time and energy. If you're really, really big, it's possible to do this, but then I would compare the cost benefit of having somebody spend the time and energy to manage sending email volumes. And just as a for instance, I managed a list in a setup like this internally. We had about 750,000 names on the list, and we had one person looking at it full time, because we had email messages and series going out every day. So they had to manage our reputation and make sure our IP addresses were clean. They had to make sure that our sender score was, reputation was looked after. They had to deal with spam complaints, and basically there was all kinds of extra or additional work that was going on in the back end. And so this is more of a business case, not to mention that you have to buy or acquire some software to do the work. So you still have to spend money to make this happen. And finally, you can use an email service provider, and there are tons of them out there. They look after the delivery, they look after the mailing reputation, they look after image hosting. They've got editing software to help you set up and run your messages. The list management is quite often automated. The unsubscribe link is automated. The list management is options are automated. They've got advanced features that help you do a better job, and I'll talk about that in some more detail. And they provide good reporting. Basically, they've spent the time and energy to make their software robust so that messages can get delivered, and they protect and manage and monitor their reputation and your sending reputation constantly. So generally speaking, using an email service provider is going to be the best solution for probably 95% of you that are reading this message. And generally speaking, if you're a small business or an entrepreneur or a professional, and you've got a list size anywhere from 1,000 up to 500,000, you're pretty safe to be comfortably using an email service provider, and the business case should work in your favor. And we'll talk about pricing as we go through this a little bit more. So our recommendation, very simply, set up an ESP account and use it. And as soon as I say that, the first question I get back is, well, which one should I set up? And I see it in forums all the time. People say, hey, I want to use a package. Which one should I use? And I hear the answers come back, and they're usually recommendations of people that have used something and have a particular favorite, or their favorite has fallen out of favor with them, and they're in the process of switching and looking for something new, and they say, oh, we used to do this and now we're doing that, and we're much happier. But the real issue is, how do you choose an ESP? How do you go through the steps to pick one that is going to meet your requirements now and at some point in the future? Now, use the term requirements, and you have requirements even though you may not know it or you may not think of it that way. But requirements are just basically saying to yourself, which features, which options, which characteristics, what do I need from my email service provider to make sure that it can do for me what I need it to do, and so that my job isn't managing the software all the time. My job is just designing, building, and sending good campaigns. And just take a thinking, for a few seconds, what your possible requirements could be. You might have a budget. You might not. You might have some thoughts in mind as to what this should cost you, anywhere from nothing up to, well, I wouldn't spend any more than 1,000 a month on my software. How big is your list now? How big is it going to be? Will you be growing your list by importing existing names from your, maybe from your e-commerce platform, or from your PayPal account, or from your QuickBooks account, or from another email service provider? Are you starting from scratch? Are you building everything as an opt-in or double opt-in right from the very beginning? We talk about a lot of this specific stuff in the course, so if you're not familiar with these terms, you definitely can learn about them in the No Spam Email Marketing course. Are you going to be using variables, inserting names or different pieces of information in the message itself? Will you be working with a single list or multiple lists or segments or categories or different groups of people? How you target your audiences and narrow them down so the right message is going to the right group? Will you be connecting with other services like PayPal or your e-commerce platform, or some other thing that programming that you've done that you want to connect directly to your email platform? Will you want to do split testing or advanced features like autoresponders? What kind of reporting do you need? Are you using reporting to report back to management, or to your, for the business purposes, to make sure that you're getting the return that you expect? Are you using reporting to improve your results? What kind of reporting is provided? Are you using reporting to really look in detail technically at your deliverability stats, when things go out, what gets bounced, how many bounces you've got? Is there a time delay? And yet when Yahoo gets all of your messages, do they hold it for a while, or do they deliver them all immediately? Has Gmail stopped receiving all your messages today? These are things that we've seen happen in past by looking at the reporting and go, wow, Gmail stopped receiving any messages from this send. So we contact Gmail deliverability and discover, oh, there was a setting that needs to be changed. We change the setting. All of a sudden, everything starts getting through. So there's a lot going on. The help and the training and the support. You might not think that you need support, but I assure you that we have talked with support and deliverability of every single email platform that we've used for all kinds of issues. Things that are supposed to work that suddenly don't. Things that freeze or get locked or break or aren't working the way they are supposed to. A new feature that we want to explore but can't quite figure it out. Your support function is going to be really important, and you will need to use it. And honestly, from the different software providers, some support environments are better than others. Will you be using RSS feeds at all? Are you going to be integrating with your social media, either for list building or for distribution and syndication? Are there list building features that you'd like to have above and beyond just create a form? Is there an API interface that if you want to do some programming, it's easy to plug in to the platform? Some have very advanced and powerful API interfaces. Some of them are very weak and very rudimentary and a little bit flaky. So you need to kind of look at that in some detail. And of course, the age-old question, how many and what kind of pre-designed templates do they have? Of all of the features or requirements, in our opinion, the pre-designed templates is one of the smallest and least important ones out there. So that's just a little hint. You don't really need to get a wide range or sweeping range of email templates to choose from. You just need your own. It needs to be small. It needs to be simple. Again, we talk about that in great detail in the course, but having a list of pre-designed email templates is pretty low on the list of requirements. So you've got to look at these things and just think to yourself, some of them are going to be more important. And then what are your choices? I mean, who's out there? These are names that you may have heard of. Aweber, Constant Contact, they've been around for a long time. MailChimp, very popular. MyEmma, Infusionsoft, very powerful. Office Autopilot, Vertical Response, Vocus, iContact, ResponseSys, one of the larger ones. Blue Hornet, very comprehensive. GetResponse, Campaigner, Lyris. There are scores of others. There are tons of platforms out there. Some of them you may have heard of because they've been doing marketing very visibly for years. Some of them are newer, some of them are smaller, some of them are niche. So you really have lots of options. And this is where the challenge comes in as well. How do you approach this? Do I go look at 50 different email service providers and see if they will meet my requirements? And the answer is you don't need to. You narrow it down to a short list and explore the short list in some detail. And your requirements, the things that you want to do, trump what they have in their features, because some of them will say, hey, we can do this and we think it's really valuable and we think it's really important and you should do it too. And when you realize that that's something that they think is really important but is not really important to you, that kind of, you don't want to let the tail wag the dog in this case. You want what you want. So make sure you're very clear on that at the beginning. So let's just take a step through this, and there's a few steps you would traditionally go through. So the very first thing is just take a list or make a list of what you want to do with your email campaigns. What are the things that you want to accomplish? Here's some really simple examples. You might want to connect it with your e-commerce platform. You want to write a newsletter and send it. You want to collect names on your website. You want to connect it to Facebook when you're broadcasting. Those are some examples of things that might be important to you. Other people might have things on there like they might want to do split tests. They might want to do more advanced autoresponder sequences or conditional statements where if you join one list, you get stopped from receiving messages from another list. So there's really a valuable step to sitting down and reviewing on paper or in a document exactly what you want to do with your email campaigns. Then go read some of the sites of some of the software sites and see how they talk about their features in context of what context of what you want. What is it that they emphasize? Look at their feature list and see if there's things on there that you haven't considered. Make a list of those features and say, well, can I see myself doing this? Or is this not something I would ever consider, or I don't even think it's important, or I don't even know what it is, so therefore it's not important. So just kind of do a little bit more homework to broaden your horizons. You don't have to read through 20 sites or 50 sites. Just pick 3 or 4 and read about their feature spec sheets in more detail. And that'll give you a good sense if you're missing anything on your requirements document. And then just make a checklist and kind of rank it. The must-haves versus the like-to-haves. There's things that are going to be really important, and I sure wish I had this. You may have to make trade-offs. There might not be one package that does absolutely everything you want at the price that you want. So it really is important for you at the beginning to kind of know what you want. Make sure you have a good sense of how big your list size could be. Are you talking thousands of names, tens of thousands of names, hundreds of thousands of names? The largest list I ever dealt with was above 6 million. So there's a lot of platforms where it just wasn't viable to show up and say, hey, we've got 6 million names and we'd like to have you send them out. And how often do you want to send? Are you talking once a month, twice a month, every week, 30 times a month, every day? I mean, what's the frequency that you would be looking at? So it's important for you to really get a sense of what you're going to do, kind of visualize it in your head, kind of plan it out a little bit, but make sure that you have an idea, because that's going to affect what you're going to choose. And pricing is one of those things that really, it's going to come up somewhere. And they all price differently or a little bit differently. So there's different ways to approach this. Some systems will give you a price on a dollar amount per 1,000 messages sent. So if you have 10,000 names, you'll know that it's going to cost you $30 to send it. And if you send it twice a month, you know that that's going to cost you $60. And so that gives you some flexibility. If you go a month without sending anything, and shame on you, by the way, if that happens, then it doesn't cost you anything. If you decide you have a campaign that really needs some attention and you decide to send something 4 times a month, you know that your budget has to be able to move with it. Other companies will give you a per list size, so a straight $49 a month for 10,000 names. Some of them will kind of keep a limit on you and allow you to send a maximum of 4 times or 6 times to that list, so that they're actually counting, and then beyond a certain level they have a surcharge. Some of them will just have a flat rate for the size of your list, and you can send it every day. So when you're looking at the pricing, just make sure that you take a calculator out and just figure out what's going to happen if you send it once per month or twice per month or 6 times per month or every single day. A little question that you might want to double check on on the per 1,000 messages sent rates is if you are doing autoresponders, do the autoresponder messages count in the overall sending rate? So if you get 1,000 new people joining your list every month and you have a 6-message autoresponder sequence, are those counted in the billing, or are the autoresponders not billed? Just a little detail to make sure that you ask, because you will discover it once you start to get into it if you don't ask at the beginning. Once you've gone through that, just take the plunge, get started. There's no need to keep evaluating this to death. Once you're in, commit yourself. Don't hesitate, don't delay, don't second guess yourself. You will find, here's what happens. Email marketing looks like it's easy and lots of fun, and you'll get a piece of software which, the marketing language is very compelling, and you think it's going to be super easy, and then you get in there and you start playing around with the template, and you can't get your list uploaded, and you can't segment them properly, and you find it doesn't take a certain feature it doesn't take a certain piece of data that you have. You find that something doesn't work quite the way that you'd expected it to. You find getting the formatting done is hard work. You talk to support and they're not really helpful because it's your own design, not their design. So use one of theirs. You start to get into it and you get frustrated. Don't let that slow you down. Really, this only happens because you are at the beginning of doing something new. And if you switch, when you get to the next place, it's going to be exactly the same. There'll just be different issues that you'll have to deal with. Some of them are better at some things than others. So just take the plunge, get used to the new software. You'll become more comfortable the more time goes by, and don't feel like the second that something bad happens that you should switch and jump to another platform. Sort of commit yourself to this long term. Make the best efforts to work with the platform long term. Work with the support department when you need their help. And you'll be okay. So don't get cold feet as soon as you jump in and find things aren't going as easily as they could be. And one of the ways to kind of prevent this is just try not to take over the world on the first day. Just build things up step by step. Just make the first step collecting email addresses on your website, or make the first step setting up an autoresponder that kicks out a thank you message when somebody takes an action on something. Set up and send a simple newsletter. Just manage your implementation so that you're not trying to execute everything all at once. So build it up bit by bit, learn the features, learn how to go through the steps, do your testing, do your work. You will learn over time that the software is going to be okay, and you won't get frustrated by trying to or confused because you're trying to do too many things at once. So just build it up step by step. That has always worked with us when we're working with customers. And I almost forgot. Don't look for the cheapest deal or the best deal that you can. If you have 2 or 3 packages that you prefer and that you think that are there, you'll probably find that they're in the same pricing ballpark, unless they're doing different pricing models. Like one's a rate per 1,000 cent, and the other is a rate based on list size. You might end up find 2 systems that are feature compatible but have these 2 different pricing models. So the pricing model itself can drive the direction you take, but don't run the risk and don't do what I've seen some people do, which is, I'm going for this system because they, for the first 2,000 names, there's no charge. I'm going for the cheapest possible free one. If off of 2,000 names, you can't earn enough money to pay a $19 fee for your email software, you've got a broken business model. Email marketing is not going to help you. So don't let that $20 versus $30 or $50 be the thing which changes your pricing mind. And in the reality of the software is you tend to get what you pay for. The robust enterprise level ones that handle big mailings and are rich in features are going to cost you more money. The small ones that are limited in features, that are more for the small companies and small list size, they can be less expensive, but there are less features on the list. So you tend to get what you pay for in this environment, and the same with support. Some support departments are very responsive, robust, and available, and some of them are a little harder to get your hands on. You don't get an answer back immediately, and you have to wait. And if you're on a deadline and you need things to get done, you may not want support that has to wait. So you just take a look at that. Don't forget to take a look at the support levels, and can you get access to them by email? There's their telephone number. Do they have a chat line? All of those are good ways to get your questions answered. Or do they make you wait by filling in a support ticket, and we'll get back to you when we get back to you. So thanks very much for joining us through this session. Hopefully you've got a better sense now of how to step into selecting an email marketing service provider and picking out the one that's the right for you, so that you're more confident in your decision. And keep an eye out in your inbox. We've got more training coming, and just make a comment below, share your thoughts. I'll reply back because I kind of watch what goes on, and lots of people have comments or questions. Happy to hear them, and look forward to talking with you next time.